The United States Department of Homeland Security is a cabinet department of the United States federal government, created in response to the September 11 attacks, and with the primary responsibilities of protecting the territory of the United States and protectorates from and responding to terrorist attacks, man-made accidents, and natural disasters. In fiscal year 2011 it was allocated a budget of $98.8 billion and spent net $66.4 billion, whereas the Department of Defense is charged with military actions abroad. The Department of Homeland Security works in the civilian sphere to protect the United States within, at, and outside its borders. Its stated goal is to prepare for, prevent, and respond to domestic emergencies, particularly terrorism. On March 1, 2003, DHS absorbed the Immigration and Naturalization Service and assumed its duties. In doing so, it divided the enforcement and services functions into two separate and new agencies: Immigration and Customs Enforcement and Citizenship and Immigration Services. The investigative divisions and intelligence-gathering units of the Immigration and Naturalization Service and Customs Service were merged, forming Homeland Security Investigations. Additionally, the border enforcement functions of the INS, including the U.S. Border Patrol, the U.S. Customs Service, and the Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, were consolidated into a new agency under DHS. U.S. Customs and Border Protection. The Federal Protective Service falls under the National Protection and Programs Directorate. With more than 240,000 employees, DHS is the third largest cabinet department, after the Departments of Defense and Veterans Affairs. Homeland security policy is coordinated at the White House by the Homeland Security Council. Other agencies with significant homeland security responsibilities include the Departments of Health and Human Services, Justice, and Energy. The Department of Homeland Security has received substantial criticism over excessive bureaucracy, waste, fraud, ineffectiveness, and lack of transparency. Its information sharing centers have been accused of violating American civil liberties and targeting American citizens as potential threats to national security. Structure. The Department of Homeland Security is headed by the Secretary of Homeland Security with the assistance of the Deputy Secretary. The department contains the components listed below. Not all subcomponents are listed. See the linked articles for more details. Agencies. United States Citizenship and Immigration Services processes and examines citizenship, residency, and asylum requests from aliens. U.S. Customs and Border Protection. Law enforcement agency that enforces U.S. laws along its international borders, including its enforcement of U.S. immigration, customs, and agriculture laws while it is patrolling between all U.S. ports of entry. U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Law enforcement agency divided into two bureaus. An agency that enforces U.S. laws while it investigates and gathers intelligence on national and international criminal activities that threaten the security of the homeland, and an agency that investigates violations of the Immigration and Nationality Act and enforces the detention, deportation and removal of violators of United States immigration law. Transportation Security Administration, responsible for aviation security, as well as land and water transportation security. United States Coast Guard, military service responsible for law enforcement, maritime security, national defense, maritime mobility, and protection of natural resources. United States Secret Service, law enforcement agency that investigates threats against and provides protective services for the President and Vice President of the United States, and their immediate families as well as other important governmental officials. It also investigates crimes against the U.S. monetary system, including the crime of counterfeiting U.S. currency and other financial instruments. Federal Emergency Management Agency, agency that oversees the federal government's response to natural disasters like earthquakes, hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, forest fires, etc. Advisory groups: Homeland Security Advisory Council, state and local government, first responders, private sector, and academics. National Infrastructure Advisory Council, advises on security of public and private information systems. Homeland Security Science and Technology Advisory Committee, advise the Undersecretary for Science and Technology. Critical Infrastructure Partnership Advisory Council, coordinate infrastructure protection with private sector and other levels of government. Interagency Coordinating Council on Emergency Preparedness and Individuals with Disabilities. Task Force on New Americans, an interagency effort to help immigrants learn English, embrace the Common Core of American civic culture, and become fully American. Other components: Domestic Nuclear Detection Office, develop nuclear threat detection capabilities at all levels of government and in the private sector. Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, interagency law enforcement training facilities located in Georgia, New Mexico, and South Carolina. National Protection and Programs Directorate, risk reduction, encompassing both physical and virtual threats and their associated human elements. Federal Protective Service, federal law enforcement and security agency that protects and investigates crimes against U.S. federal buildings, properties, assets, and federal government interests. National Communications System, Directorate for Science and Technology, Research and Development, Directorate for Management, responsible for internal budgets, accounting, performance monitoring, and human resources. Office of Policy, Long-Range Policy Planning and Coordination. Office of Immigration Statistics, Office of Health Affairs, Medical Preparedness, Office of Intelligence and Analysis, identify and assess threats based on intelligence from various agencies. Office of Operations Coordination, monitor domestic security situation on a daily basis, coordinate activities with state and local authorities and private sector infrastructure. Office of the Secretary includes the Privacy Office, Office for Civil Rights and Civil Liberties, Office of Inspector General, Citizenship and Immigration Services Ombudsman, Office of Legislative Affairs, Office of the General Counsel, Office of Public Affairs, Office of Counter-Narcotics Enforcement, Office of the Executive Secretariat, and the Military Advisor's Office. National Cybersecurity Center, nomenclature. In an August 5, 2002 speech, President Bush said, "We're fighting to secure freedom in the homeland." Prior to the creation of DHS, American presidents had referred to the U.S. as the nation, or the republic, and to its internal policies as domestic. Also unprecedented was the use, from 2002, of the phrase, the homeland, by White House spokespeople. Expenditures. The end-of-year DHS annual financial report for financial year 2010 showed a net cost of operations of $56.4 billion, out of total budgetary resources of $83.2 billion. The components with the highest net cost were U.S. Coast Guard, U.S. Customs and Border Protection, and Federal Emergency Management Agency. Revenues of $10.4 billion were generated in the year. According to the Homeland Security Research Corporation, the combined financial year 2010 state and local HLS markets, which employ more than 2.2 million first responders, totaled $16.5 billion, whereas the DHS HLS market totaled $13 billion. According to the Washington Post, DHS has given $31 billion in grants since 2003 to state and local governments for homeland security and to improve their ability to find and protect against terrorists, including $3.8 billion in 2010. Audit of expenditures. The DHS independent auditor is KPMG, one of the Big Four audit firms. Due to the level of material weaknesses identified, KPMG were unable to audit the DHS financial statements for FY 2010. KPMG were unable to express an audit opinion on the FY 2009, FY 2008, FY 2007, FY 2005, and FY 2003 financial statements. Attempts to access the reports for FY 2006 and FY 2004 within the Information for Citizens portal met with a 404 error. The message from the DHS Chief Financial Officer in the FY 2010 report states, "This annual financial report is our principal financial statement of accountability to the President, Congress and the American public." The AFR gives a comprehensive view of the department's financial activities and demonstrates the department's stewardship of taxpayer dollars. The message from the DHS Chief Financial Officer concludes, "I am extremely proud of the department's accomplishments. We will continue to build upon our successes." The Secretary of Homeland Security endorsed this message, saying that the DHS is continuing to be responsible stewards of taxpayer resources. The scope of our mission is broad, challenging, and vital to the security of the nation. Thank you for your partnership and collaboration. Yours very truly, Janet Napolitano, National Terrorism Advisory System. The system has two types of advisories: alerts and bulletins. NTAS bulletins permit the Secretary to communicate critical terrorism information that, while not necessarily indicative of a specific threat against the United States, can reach Homeland Security partners or the public quickly, thereby allowing recipients to implement necessary protective measures. Alerts are issued when there is specific and credible information of a terrorist threat against the United States. Alerts themselves have two levels: elevated and imminent. An elevated alert is issued when there is credible information about an attack by only general information about timing or a target. An imminent alert is issued when the threat is very specific and impending in the very near term. On March 12, 2002, the Homeland Security Advisory System, a color-coded terrorism risk advisory scale, was created as the result of a presidential directive to provide a comprehensive and effective means to disseminate information regarding the risk of terrorist acts to federal, state, and local authorities and to the American people. Many procedures at government facilities are tied into the alert level. For example, a facility may search all entering vehicles when the alert is above a certain level. Since January 2003, it has been administered in coordination with DHS. It has also been the target of frequent jokes and ridicule on the part of the administration's detractors about its ineffectiveness. After resigning, Tom Ridge stated that he did not always agree with the threat level adjustments pushed by other government agencies. In January 2003, the office was merged into the Department of Homeland Security and the White House Homeland Security Council, both of which were created by the Homeland Security Act of 2002. The Homeland Security Council, similar in nature to the National Security Council, retains a policy coordination and advisory role and is led by the Assistant to the President for Homeland Security. As of 13 January 2011, the DHS advised the American public of an elevated national threat level, recommending that all Americans should establish an emergency preparedness kit and emergency plan for themselves and their family, and stay informed about what to do during an emergency. Creation. In response to the September 11 attacks, President George W. Bush announced the establishment of the Office of Homeland Security to coordinate Homeland Security efforts. The office was headed by former Pennsylvania Governor Tom Ridge, who assumed the title of Assistant to the President for Homeland Security. The official announcement stated, Ridge began his duties as OS Director on October 8, 2001. The Department of Homeland Security was established on November 25, 2002, by the Homeland Security Act of 2002. It was intended to consolidate U.S. executive branch organizations related to Homeland Security into a single cabinet agency. The following 22 agencies were incorporated into the new department. According to Peter Andreas, a border theorist, the creation of DHS constituted the most significant government reorganization since the Cold War, and the most substantial reorganization of federal agencies since the National Security Act of 1947, which placed the different military departments under a Secretary of Defense and created the National Security Council and Central Intelligence Agency. DHS also constitutes the most diverse merger of federal functions and responsibilities, incorporating 22 government agencies into a single organization. Prior to the signing of the bill, controversy about its adoption centered on whether the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Central Intelligence Agency should be incorporated in part or in whole. The bill itself was also controversial for the presence of unrelated riders, as well as for eliminating certain union-friendly civil service and labor protections for department employees. Without these protections, employees could be expeditiously reassigned or dismissed on grounds of security, incompetence or insubordination, and DHS would not be required to notify their union representatives. The plan stripped 180,000 government employees of their union rights. In 2002, Bush officials argued that the September 11 attacks made the proposed elimination of employee protections imperative. Congress ultimately passed the Homeland Security Act of 2002 without the union-friendly measures, and President Bush signed the bill into law on November 25, 2002. It was the largest U.S. government reorganization in the 50 years since the United States Department of Defense was created. Tom Ridge was named Secretary on January 24, 2003 and began naming his chief deputies. DHS officially began operations on January 24, 2003, but most of the department's component agencies were not transferred into the new department until March 1. After establishing the basic structure of DHS and working to integrate its components and get the department functioning, Ridge announced his resignation on November 30, 2004, following the re-election of President Bush. Bush initially nominated former New York City Police Department Commissioner Bernard Kerik as his successor, but on December 10, Kerik withdrew his nomination, citing personal reasons and saying it would not be in the best interests of the country for him to pursue the post. On January 11, 2005, President Bush nominated federal judge Michael Chertoff to succeed Ridge. Chertoff was confirmed on February 15, 2005, by a vote of 98-0 in the U.S. Senate. He was sworn in the same day. In February 2005, DHS and the Office of Personnel Management issued rules relating to employee pay and discipline for a new personnel system named MAC. The Washington Post said that the rules would allow DHS to override any provision in a union contract by issuing a department-wide directive, and would make it difficult. District Judge Rosemary M. Collier blocked the plan on the grounds that it did not ensure collective bargaining rights for DHS employees. A federal appeals court ruled against DHS in 2006, pending a final resolution to the litigation. Congress's fiscal year 2008 appropriations bill for the DHS provided no funding for the proposed new personnel system. DHS announced in early 2007 that it was retooling its pay and performance system and retiring the name MAC. In a February 2008 court filing, DHS said that it would no longer pursue the new rules, and that it would abide by the existing civil service labor management procedures. A federal court issued an order closing the case. seal. A DHS press release dated June 6, 2003 explains the seal as follows. The seal is symbolic of the department's mission to prevent attacks and protect Americans on the land, in the sea and in the air. In the center of the seal, a graphically styled white American eagle appears in a circular blue field. The eagle's outstretched wings break through an inner red ring into an outer white ring that contains the words U.S. Department of in the top half and Homeland Security in the bottom half in a circular placement. The eagle's wings break through the inner circle into the outer ring to suggest that the Department of Homeland Security will break through traditional bureaucracy and perform government functions differently. In the tradition of the Great Seal of the United States, the eagle's talon on the left holds an olive branch with 13 leaves and 13 seeds, while the eagle's talon on the right grasps 13 arrows. The top element, a dark blue sky, contains 22 stars representing the original 22 entities that have come together to form the department. The left shield element contains white mountains behind a green plain underneath a light blue sky. The right shield element contains 4 wave shapes representing the oceans, alternating light and dark blue separated by white lines. The seal was developed with input from senior DHS leadership, employees, and the U.S. Commission on Fine Arts. The Ad Council, which partners with DHS on its Ready.gov campaign, and the consulting company Lander Associates were responsible for graphic design and maintaining heraldic integrity. Headquarters. Since its inception, the department has had its temporary headquarters in Washington, D.C.'s Nebraska Avenue complex, a former naval facility. The 38-acre site, across from American University, has 32 buildings comprising 566,000 square feet of administrative space. In early 2007, the department submitted a $4.1 billion plan to Congress to consolidate its 60-plus Washington area offices into a single headquarters complex at the St. Elizabeth's Hospital campus in Anacostia, southeast Washington, D.C. The earliest DHS would begin moving to St. Elizabeth's is 2012. The move is being championed by District of Columbia officials because of the positive economic impact it will have on historically depressed Anacostia. The move has been criticized by historic preservationists, who claim the revitalization plans will destroy dozens of historic buildings on the campus. Community activists have criticized the plans because the facility will remain walled off and have little interaction with the surrounding area. On January 8, 2009, the National Capital Planning Commission had approved the Department of Homeland Security's plans to move into the campus of St. Elizabeth's Hospital. In February 2015, the General Services Administration said that the site would open in 2021.